All right, the global bureaucratic effort from the World Health Organization to create a pandemic treaty continues, even as the WHO's deadline for an agreement in May of this year rapidly approaches.
We have, I think, enough time, if there is political commitment, to have a deal and have the agreement by May 2024, so it will be endorsed in our assembly.
That was WHO Secretary General Tedros Ghebreyesus this week, pushing once again this global power grab. Now, many concerns continue to surround this proposed treaty. The lack of transparency, the backroom negotiations, WHO's overreach, and the infringement on U.S. sovereignty, unknown financial obligations for taxpayers, and what they want to do is censor speech that would challenge what they would do in a pandemic or other emergency. Joining me now to discuss this and much more is Congressman Chris Smith. He's senior member of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs and a co-chair of the House Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism. He represents the 4th Congressional District of New Jersey, and he was just over in Geneva at the World Health Organization. Also, he spoke to the issue of UNRA at the UN Watch, and we're going to talk about that as well. Congressman Smith, welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Great to see you again, Tony. Thank you.
Glad you made it back to the States safely, that you got out of the WHO building before they declared an emergency. So but before we discuss the WHO, you just returned from the International Summit for a Future Beyond UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Work Agency that is, well, quite frankly, they've been connected to Hamas. In fact, an intelligence report that the Wall Street Journal ran from the Israelis said that as many as 10% of the 12,000 employees of UNRWA are connected to Hamas or one of the other jihadist organizations.
Now, it's an outrage that the U.S. taxpayer has provided $7 billion over the years, and Biden has provided at least $1 billion and wants to give much more to UNRWA, the UN Works Relief Agency. It is run basically by Hamas-inclined individuals, if not Hamas itself. There's very rarely a distinction between the two. And Tony, what they do is they train up young people to hate Jews. And they do it methodically in the schools. And you wonder why there are so many poisoned Palestinian youth who should be learning about tolerance and respect for others are learning to hate Jewish boys and girls and men and women. I've seen the textbooks. I've had hearings in the past. I've had 3 hearings in the last 9 months alone. The last one, Brian Mast and I did a joint hearing. And we made it so clear. We heard from experts who told us just how bad it really is. And it only confirms what we've known for decades. I offered an amendment, Tony, in 2003 to shift all the money away from UNRWA and put it to non-governmental organizations that could be vetted to ensure that it goes to non-anti-Semitic entities. And it never got a vote in the Senate. And so now we're up against it again. And when you said the 10%, you're absolutely right. But the tip of the iceberg is that it's much, if not overwhelming majority of Palestinians, especially young people who have been in these schools. They are really child soldier schools where you build up this hatred that is unfettered towards Jewish people and to the state of Israel, and you wonder why they commit atrocities that are unspeakable.
Yeah, I just want to be very clear for our viewers and listeners. You know, there's attention has been given to this since October the 7th, when the atrocities were committed by Hamas as they crossed into Israel and literally butchered, tortured, captured, raped, pillaged the innocent civilians. This goes back 2 decades or more. I mean, they go back to 1949 when UNRWA was created, but this is not new. You've been in Congress a long time, and you have been warning about this. What we saw on October the 7th, from my perspective, and I've seen this for a decade and a half when I've gone to Israel multiple times and looked at the textbooks, looked at the material, this is the fruit of what UNRWA has been sowing for decades.
Exactly. And, we weren't heard, and I've raised it with the Bush administration, obviously with the Obama, and now Trump. Trump actually did the right thing. He defunded them completely because of their anti-Semitism that is lethal and is having, as you said, why are we surprised when they do all of these horrific things to Jewish people? Because they've been taught to do it, and they think they're getting rewarded both in this life and in the next when they do it. I mean, it's an abomination, and we've raised it. And UNRWA comes over and talks to some people. Some diplomats talk to others and say, "Oh, we fixed it." And I'm not alone in this. Say, there's no fixing of this. We haven't had it, and now I just got a piece of legislation passed in the Foreign Affairs Committee that will completely defund UNRWA and put the money elsewhere for people who need food, clothing, and shelter.
Yeah, this can't be fixed. This can't be fixed. You cannot fix this organization. It is corrupt at its core. I want to switch to another topic, another area that you've been warning your colleagues in Congress, the American people. Literally, you've been sounding a global alarm to the World Health Organization and their global power grab as they are pushing for the ratification of a pandemic treaty. They're calling it an accord, but it's a treaty in its effect by May. You spoke to this over in Geneva. Give us the latest.
Yeah, they're on a fast track. Much of this has been done without very much scrutiny or insight. You joined us, and you were very powerful when you spoke at the press conference we had several weeks ago. There are so many unanswered questions, but what we do know from the draft of this pandemic treaty is that it will be binding. They say it right in the treaty. It'll be just as if the U.S. Congress and the president signed a law that does all of these things. It promotes abortion on demand in Article 6, which is very clear. It also, you talked about the whole idea of the combating. They have language in Article 18 about combating false, misleading, misinformation, so-called, or disinformation. How about the misinformation and disinformation that came from WHO itself about the origins as well as the lethality and transferability of COVID-19? They lied, and they did whatever the Chinese Communist Party wanted them to do, because Tedros got his job from Xi Jinping, the communist dictator there. So, we're going to be, and this will be a matter of law. We've asked and demanded that if it does get approved, that Biden submit it to the Senate for ratification so it could be looked at from top to bottom. He's very likely to do an executive agreement. That's what I talked about to members who over there who are negotiating, which bypasses Congress, exactly what he did with the Iran nuclear deal. And I did talk to a number of people who were concerned that there's no more emphasis on the issue of being faithful. Remember the old ABC,
right.
Abstinence, be faithful? That's like gone by the wings. And you have, empowering, unfortunately, a lot of men to have multiple sex partners among young women. And this terrible AIDS pandemic has not been completely overcome by a long shot because it has unleashed that kind of bad behavior towards women, especially young women. So, where does this, do anything about that? It also, beginning in 2026, we, the United States government, taxpayers is what I'm talking about, will be assessed a certain amount of money, which could be in the billions. We don't know how much. And because it's a treaty and it's binding, we have to pay it. And if there is another pandemic like COVID-19, they have enormous new powers based on the drafts I've seen, and it's not done yet, to tell us, to mandate that what they have to do. I mean, look what Biden did when he mandated that businesses provide the COVID vaccine under the OSHA. Remember,
Right.
He had no power to do it. He did it. To its credit, the U.S. Supreme Court stopped it. But how are we going to stop this when Tedros and company tell us you've got to provide vaccines to 2-year-olds, or you have to have, close up your shops and shut down everything, whatever the next, there could be advice given. That would be one thing, but it's unclear how coercive their powers will be to impose that upon the United States of America and other countries.
Is there a precedent in the UN of this type of power being given to an agency?
That's a great question. I don't know of any where they have been, most of the UN treaties and covenants don't have enforcement capabilities. I mean, the UN human rights, the Refugee Convention and all the others, the one on human rights, and there are a number of them. We've ratified the Refugee Convention. They don't have an enforcement capability. This is binding, and I say that with exclamation points. This is as if, like I said, we passed a law, House and Senate, signed by the president, and we will have to do this.
Right.
And the first manifestation will be that when these unelected bureaucrats tell us how much we have to give.
Well, when you actually read the language of what's out there, and it keeps changing, it's a moving target, but the word shall appears about 170 times, if I'm not mistaken, going off my memory of this. It's not will or could or may, it is shall,
right,
which
exactly.
is a very specific legally binding term.
Oh, without a doubt. And when you look at what Tedros himself has done, he has entered into these cooperative agreements with a number of very vociferously pro-abortion groups, including Planned Parenthood, including a group out of the European Union. And he tried to do one with the Center for Reproductive Rights, and all of us,
Right.
and the pro-life NGOs, including FRC, rallied and said, don't do it. It's been delayed. It has not been denied. So what I'm saying is that we have a situation where they are all in on promoting the LGBTQ agenda and the abortion till birth agenda. And just so that everyone listening knows, WHO used to be agnostic on the issue of abortion. They have completely and radically changed. They're just like Planned Parenthood and other organizations. And they have model legislation for every country in the world that says no gestational limits on abortion right up until the moment of birth. No conscience protections for healthcare professionals, including doctors, OBGYNs who don't want to do it or be participants, and publicly funded through taxpayer funds. And no reservations whatsoever, Tony. Not one.
And you can't challenge them. Because if you challenge, like this program would be considered to be misinformation, and they would have the weight of law to silence it, just like the Biden administration worked with social media giants to silence critics during COVID.
Exactly.
Chris, very quickly, we only got about 2 minutes left. I want to go to a third topic, because it's another issue you've been working on. You made kind of a reference to this about the global AIDS problem.
Yes.
PEPFAR. Back during the Bush administration was passed, initially a pretty good program, but it's been hijacked by the Biden administration, and there's a push to renew it. And this money is going to go and be diverted to promote things that are antithetical to a pro-family viewpoint of life.
You absolutely subbed it up correctly, Tony. And unfortunately, there are some pro-lifers who are willing to look askance at the evidence, which is overwhelming, that Biden has hijacked this. And even there, where is the top-to-bottom review as to these thousands of grantees and sub-grantees who are getting the money? What are they actually doing? Biden put out guidance to all of the non-governmental organizations getting this money when he did the reimagining of PEPFAR, which means they just changed, what they're supposed to be doing, which is mitigating that pandemic and helping people, mother-to-child transmission, and said, change the laws. Change the laws on LGBTQ, change it on abortion, and do it. You have our full blessing to do it. So there's a critical mass. It's almost, like a Trojan horse. In comes all of this $6 billion plus per year from the United States government, which we, those of us who think that it was a good idea because we want to stop a pandemic called AIDS, but then they hijack it and they have this other agenda where the NGOs who are antithetical, to use your word, to everything we believe in, are also pushing that simultaneously in all of these countries. And, they use all of the well-honed strategies they use right here in Washington, D.C., all of the hyperbole and disinformation about abortion being so safe. It's not safe to the baby. It's 100% unsafe, and it's not safe to the moms.
Right.
They're also training healthcare professionals who will then, in a dual role, will be giving out the abortion pill.
Yeah.
What does that do? It starves the baby to death.
Chris,
and WHO is all in for that.
We're up against a break, but we're going to have to unpack this further, and we're going to have you back on to talk about it. Thanks so much for being with us today.